Hello, everybody. I have just had a friend ask me a really loaded question, which was, is ramen broth easier to make than pho broth, the Vietnamese beef noodle soup? The answer is yes, but it's a loaded question. Making the broth for ramen itself is not that complicated, but actually the process of assembling an entire bowl of ramen is more the hard part. And as I have learned, it's really hard to learn one aspect of ramen making without having to learn a whole ton of other stuff. So now that I've been talking about it, I kind of want some. So I'm going to try to make a quick video and talk about this process a little bit and some of the things involved. Here we go. A couple of things that are essential to this process, which you are probably going to have to find at a local Asian market. So here we go. First thing we're going to want is to find some fresh noodles. Now you can use the dried instant ones, but these are going to be way better. I also can make noodles myself. I've done it, but it doesn't really heighten the dish any further than just using some of these. Next thing we'll need is lots of ginger. You're probably going to need a big chunk like this. Some green onions as well, lots of them. Here we're picking the pork belly, as well as some chicken thighs. Okay, so here we're going down the dried aisle. Now this can be pretty intimidating. We have dried shiitake mushrooms at home, but this is one of the things you will need. Here is the kombu, the kelp seaweed you need. This is not what you need. This is wakame. This is what's used for miso soup. This is also not what you need. These are nori sheets, which are used as a topping, but also for sushi. Here are the bonito flakes. This is dried tuna. They have a great sort of smoky flavor. And Sapporo is not necessary, but... Alright, so we have everything assembled here. This is 16 cups of water. So most of this is all going to go in all at once, except for the bonito flakes, which we'll talk about in a second. So most of the ramen broth is always a mixture of like land and sea. So in this case, this is a pork and chicken broth, which I like to do. So this is 14 ounces of pork belly and then 2 whole chicken thighs. Next to that will be aromatics, which will be your green onions. This is 4 whole green onions, and then this is about 4 inches of ginger sliced up. This is 2 sheets of the kombu, which is the kelp seaweed, which I rinsed off and cut into pieces. This is 6 dried shiitake mushrooms, which I also rinsed off just slightly because sometimes they have some dust on the outside. So then this is roughly 4 tablespoons of the bonito flakes, which is a dried tuna. Try to imagine almost like tuna bacon. It makes a really nice sort of like smoky smell, but they go on into the pot like last because you're going to filter all this stuff out, and you don't want to overcook it, otherwise it'll just disintegrate. So here we go, let's add it all. I should note, I've learned from a previous experience not to use too much chicken. One time I got overzealous, and using too much chicken and too many bones sort of makes the broth turn into this gray, sort of unappealing, cloudy thing. All right, here we go. So we're boiling. Take this off. I'm gonna reduce the heat. And then you'll see you've got some foam and sort of scum that comes from the meat, which we're gonna skim off. So I should note that the skimming process will be continual throughout cooking the broth. You're going to check on it occasionally and remove anything that comes to the surface until you're done. Alright, so the process of skimming it should take a minute, but once you get all of it out, it'll look something like this. This is everything I removed, just so you can see. It's nothing to worry about. It's mostly just the blood coagulating and other impurities from the meat that gets boiled out, but it can leave you with sort of a funky smell if you don't remove it. We're going to add the bonito flakes and then basically just let this simmer for between 3 to 5 hours. You heard that right. So now you may be thinking, what the hell do I do while I'm waiting around for 3 to 5 hours for the broth? This gets into that whole thing I talked about, where all of the other pieces that culminate in assembling a bowl of ramen have their own cooking processes, and you're probably going to be doing this. You don't have to, but I'm going to go over some of my favorite things to do and how we do them. And the first thing we're going to do is pickled ramen eggs. So these are the kinds of like soft, boiled, jammy eggs that you get when you order ramen from a restaurant, and we're going to show you how to make them. Originally, when I recorded this part, I said that you should boil them for 7 minutes. That is incorrect. It's actually 6 minutes. Doing this on electric stoves is harder. Gas stoves are better because they're more consistent. All right, so now we're going to remove the eggs and then put them directly into ice water. So this crash in temperature is intended to help separate the egg whites from the shell, making them easier to peel later. So you're just going to let them cool down until they're cold enough to handle, and then we'll start with the next step. All right, cool. So once we've got our eggs separated from the shells, which there's a whole trick to that, which I don't get right every time. But anyway, we're now going to add them to the pickling liquid. So this is half a cup of water and half a cup of soy sauce, equaling 1 cup. This is about 3¼ tablespoons of mirin. So that's sweet cooking rice wine seasoning. It looks like this when you find it at the store. And then this is about a tablespoon of grated ginger. And so we're going to put all that into this container along with the eggs. I accidentally described the mirin as rice wine vinegar. That's not accurate. I can't remember what the actual distinction is. And then what's going to happen is that this is going to flavor the outside of the eggs and give them a nice sort of toasted color, and then keep the yolks inside gentle. Well, that part of the process is over, and I've still basically got 2 hours to sit around. So I'm just gonna go play some video games and chill, and then we'll come back to the rest of it. All right, so we're at the 3-hour mark, and this is pretty much the result we're looking for. It's got a bit of color to it, but it's not cloudy. Oh. It's still clear, and the meat is fully cooked and tender. The chicken's pretty much falling apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and start to remove some of this stuff, the pork especially, and I'll talk about why in a minute. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to use the pork from our broth to make chashu pork. So this is completely cooked through. It's really tender. Pretty much some of it fell apart as I was trying to get it out of there. But I'm going to add some sauce and some aromatics to this, and then cook it a little bit further to really give it the chashu flavor. So this is 1 cup of water and 1 cup of soy sauce. This is 1 cup of mirin, which is the cooking wine, the rice wine we talked about earlier. 4 cloves of garlic, another sort of 4 inches of ginger, and 3 green onions. And this is about 2 teaspoons of salt. This is sea salt in this case. I'm not using kosher salt. Well, I'm going to bring this to a boil first. And then I'm going to turn the heat way down to low and then let it cook for about another hour. Typically, what you would do, if this pork was raw, right, raw pork belly, you would put it into the oven, cover it, and then cook it for another like 3 hours to really get it like slow cooked. But in this case, since it's already cooked, we're not going to need to go that long. We're just going to cook it so that it gets a little bit more tender and the sauce gets absorbed by the pork. All right, so now that that's at a boil, I'm going to just let this simmer on a low heat for about an hour. All right, as you can see, this is our strained ramen broth. It's got a nice color. This, you'll see all these sparkly bits. This is essentially rendered fat from the chicken and pork, which adds to the flavor. And it's only a little cloudy. For the most part, it's still clear. If this was a chicken-only broth, it would be more clear than this, but this one is a chicken and pork mixture. Now, you can cook this further, reducing it down if you want the flavor to be stronger. but obviously you're going to start to lose some amount. So if I had a larger group of people that were feeding that, I'd probably leave this as it is. But since there's probably only 3 of us, I may cook this down just a little bit further. Maybe cook off, you know, like half a cup from this. So we'll do that in a little bit. So there's only a few things left to do to complete the dish. But at this point, you're probably wondering, really? There's no seasoning. Why is there no seasoning in this dish? Well, that will make sense in a few minutes. As I said before, the broth here is usually intended to be almost sort of a blank canvas, and then your tare or your sauce, your flavoring is what really adds the sort of salty umami punch that you're looking for when you usually have it in a restaurant. For our seasoning, as I talked about before, we're going to make up the miso tare. Now, in this is basically what we're going to use to make it, and this is 2 tablespoons of red miso, 2 tablespoons of white miso, and about 2 teaspoons of minced ginger. I'm just using the jarred stuff because we're in a hurry. But yeah, you can just mix this up. I'm going to add just a little bit of our ramen broth to make this easier to mix up. And then there you go. What you end up with is this sort of miso paste, which you could use as your flavoring. Now, this is packed full of salty umami flavor, which is really, it's stronger than you think it is. And this is what's going to flavor the ramen. So the thing is that this is how all of the other ramen dishes pretty much work, is that you have some kind of flavoring like this. So instead of this, if we were just doing shoyu ramen or soy sauce, the tare would be soy sauce. If the ramen is tantanmen, which is like a ground pork ramen, then in that case it's like chili oil and sesame paste instead of miso paste, and that's what gives it its color. So this is where most of the real flavor and punch comes from. Now, as an additional topping, I'm going to cut up and use some bok choy, and I'm going to rinse these thoroughly before we blanch them for the final dish. But yeah, you've always got to get your bit of greens in there for the color and just a bit of healthy addition for you. Yeah, so if you're using bok choy, make sure to rinse it thoroughly, as there's often the bits of dirt and maybe even bugs inside them. All right, so we finally have all the pieces ready to go, and now we have to set up to assemble a bowl of ramen. Now, this is the part that's kind of tricky, because in order to do it quickly and keep everything warm, there's a bunch of different steps that all have to happen in rapid succession. You don't have to do it this way, but this is basically the way it's done. First, we're going to need to bring a big pot of water to boil. This is going to be for our bok choy, really quickly, just to blanch them, and then also for our noodles. Over here, we've got the broth reheating up, so this is going to come to a boil again. And then here is what happened with our chasu. Now you can see how the sauce has sort of permeated everything. That stuff's going to be delicious. Gonna blanch our greens real quick. They only need like a minute or so, maybe less. Basically just want to get them cooked and wilted, but then maintain their color. One of the other things we're going to do is preheat these bowls by adding some boiling water to them. So this keeps the bowl warm, so that when you start to assemble the ramen dish, the temperature of the soup doesn't just crash and then you end up with a cold bowl, which is terrible. Thankfully, we have this little thermos here that, or kettle, I guess, that keeps the boiling water ready for us all the time, so I don't have to wait. So we've got our piping hot bowls ready to go. All right, cool. One of the downsides to this, though, is that it will sort of color the water green, but that's okay. It doesn't bother me. I'm just gonna set that there to drain out for a second. All right, so I've got our noodles ready to go here. Everything's ready. So now you're gonna see how quickly this process has to move. The noodles only take about 45 seconds to cook. So the first thing I want to do is dump out this hot water and then add some of our tare, 2 tablespoons, into the bottom of the bowl. We're going to add a bit of the broth. You can see how that clouds it up pretty quickly. So with a fork, whisk this together real quick, and then that'll be ready to assemble once those noodles are done. Here we go. All right, go ahead, shake them off a little bit. I'm rinsing these off because sometimes if you don't, they sort of have like a strange smell to them. All right, so in there, we've already got our char siu pork, the blanched bok choy, and some thinly sliced green onions. This is one of our pickled eggs, which I'm gonna cut open, and we're gonna find out if I cooked them properly or not. Well, I did. They were cooked properly and they're jammy, but I broke it a little bit. But we'll go ahead and set those in there. And then one last finishing touch. There we go. Added just a little bit of pickled ginger there for a bit of color, and we have got ourselves a decent bowl of miso ramen. And that is the basic process for doing that. I know I say basic, but as you can see, there's a lot of steps involved in putting this together because each ingredient is treated a little differently in order for you to get your final result. The broth, the tare, the noodles, the toppings, which include the meat, vegetables, and the pickled eggs. Alright, wife's taken care of. This is my bowl, and instead of the ginger, I'm going to add a bit of this chili oil that I make for a little bit of heat. This stuff is super good. There we go. Did a little bit better cutting the egg on this one. I didn't break it. Let's see how we did. Alright, so this. The char siu pork, I mean, this is pretty much the thing that I wait the whole day to be able to eat. It's really hard to describe the kind of flavor, the intense sort of savory umami that this has. It's like bacon times 10. See about the noodle. The heat is already hitting me. Alright everyone, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed having this look into how ramen is made. This may not be 100% authentic, but this is the method that I've been learning over the past couple of years. And it gets pretty close to restaurant quality. It's definitely a lot of fun. And I like, having this kind of knowledge.